While the shows played, I wrote notes, and the trips to different libraries later filled me in on what was real and what was bullshit. Turns out most of those shows are a crock, but they gave me the right keywords, and my research began in earnest. Most of all, I found a Reddit thread where someone, for the sake of argument, detailed everything needed to get away with murder in a tremendously long post that had received multiple golds. We only intended a beating, but the advice still applied. I learned quite a bit from that spiel. It turned out that the solve rate for most crimes was still abysmal, and that the police were more concerned with robbing the citizenry these days than catching gangbangers. Our intended targets weren't poor, so they would be an investigation. But it would be easy enough to make the case a difficult one. Difficult cases were often quickly abandoned. We just had to make sure to leave no DNA, no good description, and painful but not highly visible wounds. That last rule was part of the media theory of crime. Without a good picture that evokes the emotions, there's no story to tell. Without a story, the media doesn't pick up on it, and nobody gives a shit. The crime fades away as if it never happened. The Big Friday approached, the same as any other day, but my stress was off the charts. It was all I could do to maintain the outward appearance of normality. I walked into that bar half an hour early expecting to see cops setting up for a sting operation, but there were only a few scattered families eating wings and burgers at various tables. My two conspirators sat in the far back section. They too had arrived early. At first, we hunched over and whispered to each other about all that we had learned over the past few weeks, but we quickly realized that our secretive behavior just made us look suspicious. Relaxing, we took on the nonchalant manner of the families around us. It was then that Jake said, "We do Tom's boss first." I frowned. "How did you decide that?" "Think about it. Our most determined member," explained, looking over at Tom as he spoke. "I'm the angriest of us, clearly. We leave my boss for last, because I'll make sure it happens. Agreed?" We nodded. "Good. Then on that same logic in reverse, Tom is the meekest of us three." Tom shrugged sheepishly. I'm still in, though." "I know you are, buddy. That still means we flip the logic around. Your boss is first. Us two will handle it. Best you don't know the details, except the time you'll need an alibi. We'll let you know." I nodded and gulped. Jake and I were really going to do this. We'd paid cash and went our separate ways, after exchanging our burner phone numbers. Jake had bought an old junker car with cash, and we now use it to drive around Tom's business at intervals to check things out. He told us the man's schedule as it related to work, and we began complying his other habits. While Jake's intensity put me off, Tom's well-dressed boss wore a perpetual scowl of contempt that primarily engaged me in our plan to teach him a lesson. As we watched through the windows of the building, the man simply oozed of prickishness. At times we actually saw him screaming red-faced at Tom, who just lowered his head and took the abuse. We chose a night 2 days before a holiday party. The party would have been an ideal time to catch well-dressed prick alone, and likely drunk, at abnormally late hours, and avoiding that opportunity was exactly how we would derive suspicion away from Tom. If it had been one of the employees, the police would reason. Surely they would have chosen the more opportune night. I still don't really believe we were actually going to do it. It was a fun owning our own capability for violence in a way society usually forced us to suppress. It was fulfilling, in some strange animal way, to realize and entertain the fact that we actually had the power to change things directly. All the money and laws in the world couldn't stop a few determined men from exacting justice, and that thought was immensely and strangely freeing. Of course, we weren't really going to do this. The legal system would take everything from us while defending the behavior of well-dressed prick with a fury. But that last night outside Tom's office building, Jake donned his mask and slipped out of the car. When the moment came, I freaked. I did slip on my mask too, but I ran after him to stop him. This was an insane idea. I should have known Jake was angry enough to actually take that deranged step off society's allowed paths. I remember gray hair that clothes. The older man had streaks of gray hair I hadn't noticed before. Thing is, he turned and saw two masked men running at him full speed in the night. And he didn't get scared. He just sneered and began to say something condescending. Thinking back on it now, I can see how it might have been a show, false confidence, or his form of bravery, but my inner disgust flared and I showed. Jake pushed him hard with gloved hands, and well-dressed prick fell backwards, hit his head on the cement sidewalk, and lie there twitching. I asked the horrified obvious, "He can't be dead, can he? Just like that?" "He is," Jake breathed. "Shit." "What do we do?" I asked, fighting down panic. We were out of the sight of the two cameras that watched the other side of the building, but we were still exposed to the dark side street, should anyone drive by. The plan had been to hit him a few times, steal his wallet, and make it look like a mugging, and then run. Snapping out of shock and back into determination, Jake shook his head. "Nothing," he pointed down. "He fell and hit his head. There's literally no evidence on him that we even exist." "What if he's not dead? What if he wakes up?" A horrible smell wafted up from him as we stood staring down. Jake moved back. "Smell that? He's dead." He was right. I'd seen it in numerous episodes. The man's bowels had evacuated at the moment of his death. There was nothing to do but get in the car and go. For a time, I lived in agonizing fear that the cops would bust down my door, arrest me, and parade me in front of the entire neighborhood. But Tom reported back to us a week later at a new bar. The death of his boss had been considered a tragic accident, and he himself had been promoted. It had all worked out immensely better than we could have ever hoped. I was ready to be done, honestly. We'd killed a man. No message had been sent. That smug asshole had never known a moment of fear or regret for his actions. We just completely eliminated him too. I wondered if he had a family. The basic stress inside me could not I never witnessed death firsthand, let alone helped cause it. I could only console myself by believing that that man had treated his employees like he had treated his family, abusive. But there was no real way of knowing that. We'd screwed up and gone way too far. I was going to tell them I was done. It was Jake, though, that grew darker and more determined. "We're all locked into this now," he said quietly and fiercely, his knuckles white around his beer glass. He looked directly at me. "Your boss is next." I should have known then what was coming, having lived my entire life before that point in a sea of pointlessness and protection. I simply couldn't recognize the face of a true sociopath, even when he was sitting right in front of me.